Hi guys, welcome back to the Reflection Room. Today we're joined by Helena Alessi Nieves. She's the founder and artistic director of Alessi Dance Factory in Lutz. Helena is passionate about helping dancers grow not just in their technique, but in their confidence and love for the art. She's built a studio that really emphasizes both strong training and a supportive, encouraging environment. So we're really excited to talk to her about the mix between dancing and mental health today. Welcome, Helena. How are you today?
Good. How are you guys?
I'm doing good.
Yeah,
Good.
yeah, we're excited about this conversation. So we're definitely looking forward to it for sure.
I'm
Yeah,
super excited too. Mental health is a big thing in dance, especially with confidence and stuff. So I was excited to get to talk to you guys about it. So
yeah. Well, my first question has to do with the inner critic, which I feel like is really big in creative fields, dance, art, anything where you're creating something that you put out into the world and you get feedback on. So, what is that like for your dancers and in your experience?
yeah. Back when I was dancing, dancers are always their worst critic. Even when they're being judged by the judges at competitions, they're almost more harsh on themselves than the judges are. Um, I usually, before they go on stage, I try to kind of like throw in more positive reinforcement before they go on stage so that they're more in a positive headspace. Because I know sometimes if you kind of just leave them alone to just fester in their negative thoughts, they'll do a lot worse than they want to on stage. So I usually try to, remind them that no matter what they do on stage, as long as they're trying their hardest, that's enough. That whatever they do on that stage is enough. And also try to remind them that, their scores are just the opinions of three people. It's not like their worth to the dance world. So they always bring something as an individual to that stage that the judges are they're just teachers and they want to see them show their passion on stage rather than just do a bunch of perfect turns and stuff like that. They want to be entertained because they're sitting there for hours. So I just say, if there's ever like a passion award, I know we went to one competition where it was called the golden egg, and they stopped the entire competition and gave them the golden egg after they performed because they made the judges like feel their passion and they made an impression. It had nothing to do with their scores and stuff. And back when we did that competition, they were more of like a novice beginner. And so I said, I don't care what you score. I don't care if you get top 10. Your job is to go out there and earn that. And they did, which, they started crying. I started crying. It
Yeah.
was great. It was so great. They looked so excited. And, I was like, that right there, that's what it's for. So, that was a good reminder for them that like, even though it's not your best performance, it's still enough because you made them feel something pretty much. That's one of the hardest things that I try to like drill into them that like, you're enough. It doesn't matter if you wobbled on your turn. I also remind them there was one video that I saw. I don't know if you guys are familiar with YEGP. It's a very specific ballet technique competition. So you go in, these are like prima ballerinas in the making, basically. There was one girl who ran on stage, slipped and fell, but got up and did her entire dance perfectly, and she won first. Even though other dancers went on stage, didn't fall, did it perfectly, she still won because she showed it's almost more professional when you mess up and you get up like nothing happened. So you can't really teach that. That's something that they have to use their confidence for and know that even though they mess up, it's okay, just keep going because even professionals mess up. Even professionals
Yeah.
mess up on Broadway stages. Luckily, there's things happening in the Broadway stage that cover it up, but as long as they just keep going, it's not that big of a deal. And you're human. You're gonna mess up. And I think the inner critic of them just needs to be reminded that they're human and that they can mess up. So
Yeah, I really like that. I was curious as you were talking I know the inner critic is, obviously a common phrase that we use in a lot of different like fields and industries and stuff. What does that sound like for a dancer? I'm just out of curiosity. But we have our own inner critics, right? Of like,
Yeah.
depending on what we do. And so I'm just curious like what that typically sounds like or looks like for dancers.
So, the inner critic is usually comments that they either see online or comments that they hear in class that are more of like, hey, if you do this better, it will be more technically correct wise. And if they feel like they didn't do that, they feel like that they're not good enough. So I try to ingrain in them that perfect is not like perfect in dance is not that's not a true thing. Like there's nothing perfect about dance. There's clean where you do the correct movements in the correct like body positions that you're supposed to do them in. So I never try to say to them like that was perfect or I try not to use the word perfect. I usually use like practice makes clean or practice makes progress, stuff like that, because the word perfect is very, I feel like, has a negative connotation that like you strive to be this perfect dancer, but like in your mind that perfect dancer is someone else, and that someone else is not going to be you no matter how hard you try. You can never reach that perfect in your mind because that's always someone else and you will never be them, kind of thing. So that inner critic is more so looking at other dancers that can do types of things that your body just either can't or isn't ready for or hasn't learned how to do that yet, and saying, oh, well, that's perfect. I'm not. What I put on that stage is not good enough. So that's more of like the inner critic is always kind of comparing themselves to other dancers. The harshness of that inner critic is that they'll never attain that really until they see that as more of like a progress they want to see in their own body rather than a progress they see on somebody else. So I feel like that would be more of like the inner critic in a dancer. Just like if like a painter sees somebody else's painting and they try to recreate it, they're not going to be able to because that's just not them. It's going to be they're perfect, whereas that painting is that other person's perfect, but they're going to always look at that painting and just like be like, oh, well, it's not as good as that one, so it's not good, kind of thing. So that's how I kind of see it.
That's great. Yeah, I really appreciate you sharing
Yeah,
that. I thought that was really helpful, and I'm sure Hannah, like as she was, as you were talking, I was thinking, oh, it's very relatable in many different industries, like what you were just
it is.
mentioning. Comparing and striving for the certain standard, and so I'm sure it's very relatable to those that are listening.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And it even had me thinking about like the practice idea. And what I was told growing up in sports is practice makes permanent. So if you're practicing something wrong, you're creating that fundamental like muscle memory, and
Hmm.
then you're gonna just do it wrong for a long time. So it takes more work to get rid of that habit than it does to develop it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like that practice makes perfect can be really harmful.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely a slippery slope for sure.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we have some this or that questions today for you. So these are I'm just gonna fly through these questions and you tell me which one you prefer. Okay, here we go. So competition dance or recreational dance?
So I definitely have a soft spot for competition dance because that's what I grew up doing. But recreation is how their passion starts. They always have to start somewhere. They can't start on a competition dance team. They have to learn the basics through that recreational part. And that's where your confidence and your passion for dance grows. And I feel like recreational dance is very important to starting dance. And you can always be a record. You don't have to do competition dance in order to be a, famous dancer or anything like that. I have many friends that literally just grew up dancing at like a ballet studio. They just did shows with the ballet company. They just did recitals. They did high school dance and stuff in the dance department. They never grew up doing competition dance. And I feel like that they are necessary in order to have that artistic side of dance because competition is very much like, I don't call dance a sport, but competition dance is very much like a sport. They focus on specific things, at least to me. There's a bunch of different opinions on whether dance is a sport or not, but I feel like competition dance specifically in the way that it's created is even more so becoming a sport and almost somewhat losing the artistic. So I feel like recreation really holds that artistic part of dance. So I love recreation dance. Even though I do competition. I like the very specifics of competition dance, but recreation starts it all. So it's very important.
Yeah, I love that. Well, what about group confidence building or one-on-one mentorship?
So that I feel like is very dependent on the dancer. The some thrive in a group environment. They very much feed off of like that energy that a full group brings. But there are some very few that need that like one-on-one mentorship to build the confidence themselves so that they can bring that to the group. So I feel like there are some cases where one-on-one mentorship is very, very important, especially if they are the ones comparing themselves to the group. I feel like that is the moment where it's like, okay, you need a little bit more one-on-one mentorship with that confidence. But group confidence building, dance is a very much a team sport, a team artistic venture kind of thing. You have to work with a team. So that group confidence building is very much dependent on each individual's confidence level. And if you can't bring that or if you can't bring that group confidence into that, then that's when that one-on-one mentorship kind of is really important. So
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and then this one you already answered with the inner critic, but it's praise effort or praise performance.
definitely praise effort, because if you praise just the performance, they'll never grow. So if you praise that effort, then they have somewhere to go. So if they do like a perfect performance, where is there to go after that kind of thing? So that effort to put into that's where you should be praising, because that effort will bring to that performance. So if you never get that performance that you're praising, then they won't ever have that growth mentality. They'll more so look at it as like a negative connotation. So it's more praise effort, because they're getting out there, they are dancing. It might not be the right steps in that moment, but they are getting out there and they're putting effort into that dance. So definitely praising effort.
Yeah. Well, what about studio as a safe space or studio as a training ground?
Definitely a safe space, just because they'll be more willing to train harder when they know they can mess up in order to get better. So if they have that safe space to fail, they'll be able to grow and train harder, and they know where they need to work on the most. Whereas if it's more of like a training ground, it's more of like, it's this or nothing kind of thing. So you have to do it
Yeah.
just like this, and then there's nothing beyond that.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds a lot like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Like, you need the foundation of safety and security, and then after you feel that, you can go to the next level and the next and climb up. So that makes sense. Yeah, you
Yeah.
can't really thrive unless you're safe.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then parent involvement or teen independence.
Definitely teen independence. They need to know who they are as a person in order to be confident on their own. And, that parent's not on stage is not on stage with them while they're dancing. They're not in the room with them when they're training. So parents need to be more of their biggest fan than their hardest critic, because dancers do that to themselves anyways. So they're trying to look for that support system to get them out of their headspace of that critic. So I see more of like parent involvement being more of a stressor almost, because they know that that parent's going to be there. They know that that parent, like, they can't do it on their own almost. So they can't grow without that parent. They can't learn to be an independent dancer without that involvement. And I feel like at the teen age, they almost like, what's the word that I'm thinking of? They almost like crave that independence, because they always are like, I wish I was older so that I could do this. Whereas you can, as a parent, can be that support system that they need when they get off the stage and they go into that headspace. where they can almost come to you as their safe space to kind of like almost like vent a little bit if they're having like a rough time, or where they can be like, did you see that kind of thing? I did it. Like little
Yeah.
kids even do that. They're like, watch this, look what I can do. Like it starts from that age. They're like, I can do this on my own. If you can't show them anything because they're always there. So
Yeah.
it's definitely a more positive thing if that teen is allowed to have that space to learn and grow and then be able to come and show you. Because they love that.
Yeah. I love that. Well, this is the last question for the this or that category, but therapy before a big recital or competition or after?
I think definitely before, because after, if you have it after, I feel like you're already in that negative headspace, but if you go before, it almost puts you in that more positive headspace so you can talk out your anxieties rather than live through the anxieties and then have to be like, oh, well, this happened and this happened because of this kind of thing, and then talk it out after. I feel like doing it before will definitely help those anxieties to kind of release, and then you can just go to competition or recital and be like, I can just dance because I've already talked it out kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes
That's really
sense.
good. It does, yeah. And as I was listening, I was thinking, gosh, had we not known you were talking about dance, it could sound a lot like counseling in some ways. You know, this idea of like group versus one on one, it depends on the individual, and praise effort versus praise performance. It's like, same here as therapists, that's what we're doing, is really kind of validating and praising the effort put in. Parent involvement or teen independence, oftentimes we're like, let's like meet with the teen one on one, build that rapport, and then be kind of, begin to kind of get the parents involved. Our place to be safe too, not a training ground. So as you were talking, I was like, oh, very similar actually. There are a lot of similarities there between, but your experience there and then our experience as therapists. So I thought that was actually kind of funny. So we're going to move into something we love to call rapid fire fill-in questions. So I'm just going to go through. I'm going to ask them really quickly, and then let me know your answer. And then afterwards, if there's any that you want to like elaborate on, we absolutely can talk about it. But I thought it'd be fun just to kind of get your answers really quickly and see what's the first thing that comes to mind. So the first question is, the biggest myth about confident teens is?
I would say fake it till you make it exists, and sometimes it doesn't help.
That's great. Okay,
Ah.
interesting. When a dancer compares herself to others, the first thing I say is,
Don't, because you're enough.
that's a really good one. Okay, third one. The most damaging thing a dance instructor can say without realizing it is.
That wasn't good enough.
Oh, yeah. Okay. When a teen wants to quit, I always ask.
I usually ask what specifically killed your passion.
Uh, yeah. Okay, maybe we can go back to that one. I like that. All right. The self-esteem skill I wish every teen learned earlier is.
Mess ups are okay and they're important for growth.
They are important. Yeah, absolutely. Even outside of that, right? Just in life in general, oftentimes that's how we learn. When a student cries before a performance,
I try to make them laugh.
yeah.
So, yeah, I try to make
We
them
love
laugh.
humor.
It kind of
Yeah.
just resets their mood. So they like cry through they laugh through the tears, and then that usually calms them down. So
Yeah. Oh, that's a great answer. That's a great answer. And then lastly, the thing dance teaches teens that therapy also can teach teens is.
you can't change the past, so focus on making the future what you want.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Oh, I love
Yeah.
all those answers. Well, the one that we were going to go back to is, gosh, was it when a teen wants to quit? I always ask.
Yeah, so there's always a reason that a teen wants to quit. It's either they experience something negative and they just don't want to experience that anymore. And it's usually something that kills their passion. So if they start and they love it, usually at the teenage level, it's either if this is sometimes an answer and that's perfectly fine, dance just isn't my passion, which is totally fine. Sometimes they grow out of it. Sometimes they're like, I kind of want to focus on this instead. But teens that are super passionate about dance, usually they fall out of love with it because of something that's happening. And it's usually because they're getting burnt out
Uh-huh.
on one specific thing, and that grows to a thing that gets so overwhelming that they just don't want to deal with it anymore. Because if us as adults get burnt out from
Yes.
doing things that we're just not okay with anymore and there's like a breaking point. Teens have that to the extreme. Like it could just be, they don't feel confident in ballet and they don't want to deal with it anymore. If I ask, what killed your passion and they say ballet, then we can be like, okay, what specifically in ballet are you struggling with? It's usually something that they're struggling with and they feel like they can't get over. And so I usually can pinpoint where they're struggling. And if it's not, I'm just done with it. I don't really feel like dancing. I'm not enjoying it anymore just because. If I can pinpoint it, then usually we can figure out a solution to make it not so overwhelming. Whether that be, private lessons or focusing on that one specific thing, maybe explaining it differently, stuff like that. So
That's great. Your students are really, really lucky to have a teacher that's willing to do the work, because it takes work to figure out what's underneath that, as
yeah,
opposed to just getting defensive or just having a certain response that's not very individual in nature, and trying to figure out what's going on with this specific student. So, and it reminds me of what you mentioned just a few minutes ago when we were talking about competition dance versus recreational dance. I love it sounds like recreational dance is a little bit more fluid, more open to like the art. It's like the art form of it, and for them to be a little bit more creative. And again, it's not really my world, so I might be describing it wrong. But I love that idea of there being an outlet for that, for teens, for adults, even, to be able to experience that in that setting. And so that seems like you were talking about that, like the passion, and it starts there. And so yeah, it sounds like a beautiful experience. Yeah. I think that was really great to hear.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, our last section is quick hits. So we're going to go through these questions. Maybe Natalie and I can switch back and forth. But the first one is, what's one thing every dance studio owner should know about teen mental health?
That it exists and it's very, very fragile. One thing that you say that might seem, you have to know the student. Like, there's one of my students I can joke around with and stuff like that, and that's almost like how they mentally cope with their negative thoughts and stuff like that. But then there's another dancer that if I say any kind of joking matter, they shut down. So it's really important to know your dancers and to react in a way that won't be perceived as negative, because they're in a very fragile time of their life. They are learning how to feel feelings, and sometimes some specific thing that you might not perceive as negative could be perceived as negative from them. So just be aware that their feelings are also included in the things that you're teaching them. So just, make sure that you're checking in with them. And if a dancer seems shut down, usually it's because of a comment that was made, maybe not by you, maybe by another student or another teacher. That is where that teen's going to look and where that teen is going to focus on, rather than the positive comments. So just to make sure that, your comments are more positive than negative, even if it's a critique, it can still be put in a more positive way than you're doing this wrong, or it's not supposed to be that, it's supposed to be this. Because I usually say, like, especially with my younger ones, I'm usually like, so this is how you're doing it. What does it look like to you? And I try to like mimic the way that they're doing it and say, do you think that's what I showed you? Or what's the difference between what I showed you and what you're specifically doing? And then that usually clicks and they're like, oh, well, I didn't realize I was doing that. So sometimes they don't realize what their body's doing. Even if they're looking in the mirror, they can't look everywhere all at once like a professional dancer can. They're looking at specific things that you're like, they're either looking at their arms or they're looking at their body or they're looking at their feet. So you have to be like, this is what you're doing. Focus on this specific part. This is how it's supposed to look. Show me that way.
I
So
think that's
definitely,
I think you
yeah.
bring up a good point too. It's like knowing your dancers or your students, which is really significant. So kind of brings us to the next question, which was the biggest red flag. What would you say is the biggest red flag for a teen dancer that is struggling emotionally? And I'm sure part of that is knowing them and their individual kind of like signs, but any general feedback on that question?
Yeah, so Usually the biggest red flag that I notice is negative self-joking. So it's usually making light of something they find negative about themselves while dancing.
Interesting.
Usually that's when I try to make it a joking matter and be like, don't talk about my best friend that way.
I
So
love
that they
that.
know that it's a negative comment, but I'm not saying, hey, that's not good. You shouldn't be saying that. I make it more of like something they can relate to because they're always like you wouldn't talk about your best friend like that. You would be mad if somebody else talked about your best friend like that. You're my best friend in this dance world, and I don't like the way that you're talking about yourself. So that's usually something that is deemed like a red flag in my mind is definitely like negative joking and teasing of themselves because they'll spout all the goodness about their fellow dancers but then turn around and be so negative about themselves but think that if they put it in more of a joking way that it lessens it. But one thing that I learned is that anything you say your brain believes. So if
Yeah.
you say you can't do it, you can't do it just because you say you can't do it. If you say I'm trying to do it, then your brain knows that you're at least trying to, it's just not there yet. So once you say I can't do that because of this, it's like now you can't. Now you can't because you
Yes.
convinced yourself you can. So even if they're in a joking matter, their brain still perceives that as not joking and true. So I try to take away that negative self-talk about themselves.
Love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I feel like this question's pretty similar too, but how do you spot low self-esteem in high-performing dancer?
I usually spot it by them giving up quicker. So like in class, if they make one mistake, they stop doing it. They do it across the floor once, even though there's a huge space to go across the floor doing a progression. They do it once and then they walk across the other half. And I usually say, try it again. Just try it again. Like it's not going to happen the first time you do it. Might not even happen the second time. At one point it will click. So
Mm-hmm.
just kind of like give yourself grace because I did have a very high performing dancer last year with a very low self-esteem. Like they did their dance and I think they messed up one little thing and they came off stage like bawling and we had to just kind of like we sat backstage for like a good solid 15 minutes trying to help her stop crying. And then she won the perfect technique award and won first place. Like and then I one thing that like in dance, one thing to show that like it's really weird. We take off our shoe and we throw it not at the dancer, but like towards the dancer to show like you did such a good job, I can't believe it. And I did that when she walked off stage for that award ceremony. I said, "You can't tell me when you're not a good dancer because
Ah,
you didn't see it and you just won first place." So one
what a
thing
beautiful moment.
specifically that she did was very much like she would go across the floor, she would do it incorrect, she would stop doing it immediately. So like that is one thing that I spot when they're low self-esteem is that. And then also just coming off stage crying. Even if they did perfectly fine, if they come off stage absolutely bawling or absolutely devastated at what they did on that stage, that is another thing that I usually stop them and have a chat with them if that happens and be like, "Hey, what you did on I usually show them as well their performance and be like, "Was it as bad as you think?" And they're usually like, no. And so that's when I'm like, exactly. The audience doesn't know what you're doing. The only people who know what you're
Yeah.
doing is me and you. And when you mess up, I stress because I'm like, what's going on in their head?
Mhm. Yeah. No, I think that's
How are they gonna fix this?
yeah, I think that's great. And here's I'm curious, like you as a trained dancer, you're able to kind of spot like their moments of vulnerability and then how to step in and handle that. How do you handle a parent that might be doing something that is negatively affecting the confidence of their child?
I usually try to interject with more positive comments and reinforcement while they're negatively impacting. So like if the kid didn't do their best on stage and we bring them outside to meet their parent and their parent was like, I'm like, "No, that was good. They did they did really good on that stage. They kept dancing. They made it their own." And I usually try to interject that way and make it a more positive reaction so that the parent can be like, yeah, yeah, you're right, kind of thing. They don't have to go on that stage and do every single step perfectly. That doesn't matter. As long as they get up on that stage and they dance, that's good. So I think just like positive comments and reinforcements really do work with their parents.
Yeah. Well, on top of creating a safe space at the studio, what's one thing a studio owner can do like tomorrow to make their space more mentally safe?
I think if they're noticing, they can definitely, I call them come to Jesus meetings. They can definitely sit their whole team down and tell them like that mistakes are part of learning and that you will never be mad or disappointed in them as long as they go out there and dance and have fun. Like that point, I think we've had a couple dancers come to our studio because of like the negative impact that their old studio had on them. And right before their first competition during their production rehearsal, I sat them all down. After we ran everything, I said, "Hey, just so you know, I will never be disappointed in you. This will never be a reason for me to be disappointed in you, and you shouldn't either. And you should come in here, know that mistakes are important and they're a part of learning. Dance is never pretty to learn. It's always ugly, and it will always be ugly until it clicks. So just know that it's okay." And I think one of those dancers started crying when I said that. And I was like,
Yeah, I
"No, I'm
bet they
so
would.
sorry. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Like I didn't mean to make you cry." And she's like, "No, no, it's okay. It's good tears." So I was like, "Okay, as long as it's good tears." So like I think helping them to understand that point would be very important to let them know because they can't read your mind. You have to sit them down and say, "Hey, one, this meeting is not because you're in trouble." Because
Yeah.
whenever you sit them down, they're always like, "Oh God, what did we do?" You're not in trouble. I just want to remind you that this is a safe space. Just be open with communicating to your dancers. I think that's the biggest thing because you have no idea what these kids are thinking. And
No, not at all. Yeah.
if you do not make it clear for them your intentions, they have no idea because they're still
And
trying
I
to
love
figure out how
that.
to perceive people.
Exactly. And I love how you said, like, it's okay. Like that, those two words I think are really powerful. And just letting, I think about anyone, I mean, us included, when somebody says it's okay, there's a relief there. But especially in teens that, they're probably receiving pressure from just different angles. And so to hear their teacher say it's okay can be really relieving. I really enjoyed this conversation. I'm just curious, before we wrap up, anything else that you'd like to, any final thoughts that you'd like to share with us on the intersection of mental health and the dance world?
So, I think the dance world in itself can be very toxic and very negative. And as long as you, as a teacher or as a parent, teach these kids to learn their self worth early, that they can go into even just like any world. It doesn't even have to be the dance world, but specifically the dance world, they can almost like kill that negativity with like kindness. One thing that like my old acting teacher used to tell us was to leave places and people better than you found them. So
Yeah.
that almost insight on the dance world, I feel like can create a better and more positive dance world than it is right now. So I'm hoping that all of my students that come through my studio, whether it's like a year or all years, they can like go out into their professional dance world and be nice and just bring that with them.
Love
Yes.
that. Oh,
So
that
I'm
was really
hoping that
great.
their positivity will be contagious on the dance world and it'll just be a lot easier for everyone involved because
Yeah.
it is pretty harsh and so yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, we're
thank
so
you so
grateful.
much.
Yes,
Thank
you
you.
took the words right out of my
Yeah.
mouth, Hannah.
Thank you guys.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We loved having this conversation, and I feel like if anybody in the performing arts could hear that from you, from their instructor, their teacher, that would help so much. So hopefully lots of performing arts students get to hear something like this. And as we always say, until next time, keep on reflecting.